Hello, I'm Nathan Lewis, and this is the 8th episode of a series on the gold standard. I've written 5 books about economics, including 3 about the gold standard. The latest book, Inflation, What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It, was co-authored with Steve Forbes and Elizabeth Ames. I'm also a fellow of the Discovery Institute's Wealth and Poverty Program. Nicolas Oresme was a clergyman in 14th century France who served as an advisor to King Charles V. He wrote the first book devoted to monetary affairs in the West called De Moneta, or The Mint. The book begins with an introduction. In the first paragraph of the introduction to this first book about money, Oresme said, "Some men hold that any king or prince may, of his own authority, by right or prerogative, freely alter the money current in his realm, regulate it as he will, and take whatever gain or profit may result. But other men are of the contrary opinion. Perhaps my words will rouse them to finally settle the truth of this matter, so that the experts may all be of one mind, and come to a conclusion which shall be profitable both to princes and subjects, and indeed to the state as a whole." This is familiar to us now as the debate between the classical hard money and mercantilist soft money paradigm. Oresme concluded that the hard money paradigm of a currency of fixed unchanging value based on gold or silver is superior. Not much has really changed even today, except that silver since the 1870s can no longer serve alongside gold as a standard of value as it did in the past. Gold alone remains the best way to approximate the classical ideal of a currency resembling other weights and measures and maintaining a fixed stable value. But what form should this take today? The ways in which gold has served as the basis of a monetary and payment system have always been in a state of evolution. In the past, gold coins were common. By the 17th century, paper banknotes, redeemable for gold coins, began to displace bullion coinage. Today, most payments take some kind of digital form. Various forms of bank transfers have been around for many centuries, sometimes known as gyrobanking. These include today's checks, debit cards, and ACH transfers, which are largely identical to the money transfer systems of the Knights Templar of the 12th century, the grain banks of Egypt in the 4th century BC, and the Temple of Ur and Sumer in the 3rd millennium BC. Contemporary crypto stablecoins based on dollars or perhaps gold are just the latest expression of a principle that goes back literally to the beginnings of civilization, thousands of years before coinage. Ledger money is one of the oldest forms of money. Throughout all this history, attention has continued between private sources of money and government sources. At times, each has been unreliable, leading people to reach for the other as an alternative. As a general principle, the soft money paradigm is really only possible where governments have monopolized currency management, since people rarely choose an unreliable, manipulated currency when given a choice. Today, a centralized government solution is perhaps the most straightforward option for some countries, and a decentralized private market solution is best for others. The governments of Russia, Malaysia, or the United Arab Emirates might embrace gold-based currencies, as governments often have in the past, perhaps via existing institutions such as central banks. Other countries might be best off with some kind of private solution, including private solutions from foreign sources. It is not hard to imagine how much of Africa or Latin America would be best off using some kind of gold-based digital platform similar to Tether or perhaps China's WePay. But even in the case of private market solutions, some kind of government sanction is likely to be necessary. The United States had a private market-based monetary system before the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. Nevertheless, this private market or free banking system had overt government support and organization. Countries can also adopt multiple monetary systems or parallel currencies. This might seem fanciful, but it is in fact the normal state of affairs for most countries in the world, where international currencies such as the dollar or euro are used alongside some domestic junk fiat currency. Not only simple street vendors, but the country's largest corporations and the government itself are buying and selling and issuing debt denominated in international currencies. Domestic banks offer dollar-denominated bank accounts. This commerce in multiple currencies has government support and sanction. Corporations that pay euros to import capital goods and sell their goods for dollars or issue bonds in dollars, thus bypassing the domestic junk fiat currency, are not criminalized by governments. It is a simple matter to introduce another monetary option, a currency based on gold, for those that wish to use it. Governments such as China or Russia can introduce a gold-based currency of some sort alongside their existing floating yuan and rubles, or they can simply allow private market solutions to flourish. Simple trade can be accomplished without too much difficulty in a currency of unreliable value, but as soon as the element of time is introduced in some contract of some length, then currency reliability becomes more important. These contracts include wage agreements, apartment rents, leases, debts, pensions, annuities, or other insurance products. As existing fiat currencies become more unreliable, people seek some solution that allows them to make long-term contracts on reliable and transparent terms. In many countries, the only long-term debt that is accepted, in substantial size, is debt denominated in dollars and euros. Already, some countries have been excluded from the dollar and euro system, including Russia and Iran. Russia's government was recently unable to pay interest and principal on government bonds denominated in euros because it was unable to process any euro payments at all. Today, large corporations in Russia, such as natural gas producer Gazprom, mobile carrier MTS, supermarket chain Magnit, or perhaps the Russian government itself, have many billions of dollars worth of debt financing. How would they issue bonds in the future? Who would buy them? The obvious solution is to issue bonds denominated in gold, which was, in the past, the only kind of bond that anyone would accept. Once debt liabilities are denominated in gold, a corporation or government might naturally want to also denominate income and assets in gold to prevent an asset liability mismatch. Goods and services, wages, and taxes are then denominated in gold as well. Existing institutions can easily be used to create new products based on gold. The existing commercial bank system already has a vast infrastructure to manage checking accounts and process payments in domestic fiat currencies. It would be a simple matter for these existing commercial banks to also offer checking accounts denominated in gold. Instead of rubles or yuan or dollars, you would have a bank balance perhaps in grams and milligrams of gold. You could withdraw your deposits from the bank in the form of gold coins and bars of 10 to 1,000 grams. You could do business with these gold coins if you prefer, but normally nobody would do that. Otherwise, the system would be exactly the same as we are accustomed to today. Recent digital innovations promise new payment platforms that are much simpler, faster, more secure, more direct than common commercial bank solutions. A gold-based digital currency based on the new Hashgraph encryption technology could be used on smartphones. Even the earliest experiments with Hashgraph have been able to process 500,000 transactions per second, 10 times more than the entire worldwide Visa and MasterCard network. Settlement is achieved in seconds, and the costs are vanishingly small. Although digital technology allows an amazing new standard of speed and convenience, the basic idea is no different than the Bank of Amsterdam in the 17th century. After several decades where gold was not commonly used as money, some are hesitant to hope that gold can serve as a reliably stable standard of value as it has for many centuries in the past. It appears that gold's value goes up and down quite unpredictably, but this is mostly just what is known to economists as money illusion. Money illusion is the tendency for people to believe that their currencies are stable in value, and thus any change in the ratio of value between their currency and some other thing, in other words the price, reflects a change in the value of the thing, not the currency. But we also know that today's floating fiat currencies are highly unstable in value. Let's imagine that gold or some other thing was perfectly unstable in value in a precise and scientific way like other weights and measures. What then would be the exchange rate or price between this ideal benchmark and a floating fiat currency? Obviously, the exchange rate would go up and down, in this case reflecting entirely the change in the value of the floating fiat currency against what you could call a stable measuring rod of value. While nobody suggests that gold achieves this ideal of perfect stability, nevertheless history has shown that it is pretty good. What we actually see regarding the so-called price of gold is what we would expect to see if gold still was reliably stable in value today, just as it has been for many centuries previous. During World War I, all the world's major currencies were severed from their gold anchors and floated in value at least a little and sometimes a lot. During the early 1920s, some people predicted that difficulties would ensue as governments went from fiat currencies back to gold, but no such difficulties took place. Again, during the Great Depression and World War II, currencies were severed from their golden anchors. Although the United States still maintained an official policy of keeping the dollar pegged to $35 an ounce of gold, some thought this was a kind of fiction. Gold coins had been banned since 1933. The trade and capital controls of wartime stifled international gold transfers. What pricing that existed showed that the dollar varied from its $35 an ounce parity. Again, some people worried that a return to the peacetime gold standard would introduce some disruptions. But again, nothing happened, and 2 marvelous decades of prosperity followed. Today, the BRICS, a consortium of 10 countries led by Russia, China, India, and Brazil, with an additional 22 countries in application stages, has set itself the task of establishing an international monetary and financial architecture independent of dollars and euros. Particularly since 2022, this effort has intensified. After some discussions of alternatives, they decided to focus on gold as the primary basis of this new system. These countries also have a history of gold and silver-based money, going back thousands of years, and they also know that it works. At this time, although progress has been made, it seems to resemble stumbling in the dark. The quickest and easiest way to get things up and running would be for existing large banks, such as the state-owned Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, or the state-owned Sberbank, or the state-owned State Bank of India, to offer gold-based checking accounts that can make payments to other gold-based checking accounts. These can be denominated in grams and milligrams of gold. Foreign entities, for example in Saudi Arabia or Iran, can also have accounts at these Chinese or Russian banks, allowing them to make payments to each other. The government and large corporations should issue some bonds denominated in gold, at least in trial size. Purchases of these bonds and later payments of interest and principal would be made via these gold-based bank checking accounts. No gold coins need change hands. In very short order, an infrastructure can be developed that would resemble the international banking and payment system of 1910. Governments today should study that period, not to imitate it exactly, but to understand how it worked and what can be applied today. Fortunately, there is an excellent resource to achieve this, the 1910 United States Senate Monetary Commission report, which was prepared in advance of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. In over 20 volumes, a detailed study of the international monetary and financial system is presented, mostly written by the bank professionals themselves, not academic economists who, then as now, didn't know what they were talking about. For centuries, the yield on gold-denominated debts from the best governments was in the 3 to 4% range, and the best commercial credits about 1 percentage point more than that. Today, bonds denominated in floating fiat currencies have similar yields, producing little incentive to issue bonds in gold. But that could change quickly, and soon nobody would be interested in buying bonds denominated in unreliable euros, dollars, or British pounds. Around this time, the better governments would accept the classical monetary paradigm, and gold-based money in particular, as the best path to prosperity and ultimately world leadership, while the lesser governments would continue to rely on their failed soft money experiments, getting the same bad results with greater intensity. These governments would decline and fall, just as governments always have, that did not have sound money fixed to gold.